Okay, I thought that this was an excellent segment on the Chris Hayes show. It had to do with Obama's speech today. You're going to have two people that are going to comment about it. One is a black person, which I will say, let's say, represents the black community. And the other is a former police officer who, let's say, will represent the police community. These two gentlemen are frequent commentators, or guests, I should say, I'm sorry, on MSNBC, which the right says is a liberal NBC, and us guys on the left say they're kind of moving towards the center. Anyway, that being said, President Obama's speech is speaking directly to these two individuals, and in particular, the police or former police officer and the writer. And what Obama says is, people are not listening to each other. I'm going to play this particular clip, and I'm going to stop it at points in time to point, I guess, certain things out. Here we go.
Joining me now, Jelani Cobb, staff writer for The New Yorker, who attended the memorial service where the president spoke today in Dallas, and former New York City police officer Eugene O'Donnell, now a professor of law and policy studies at John Jay College. Jelani, let me start with you. You were in that room. What was it like to be in there?
It was somber, Chris. And, when I came in, I didn't know exactly what kind of tone there would be there. There was not a great deal. I was thinking also that you would think that people would be really tense given, the nature of what happened last week. But it really wasn't. It was a much more somber kind of environment. And, people came in as the families of the deceased came in, the audience would stand up on its feet and applaud each. They must have done this 5 or 6 times, so each time a group of family members came in. And so it was much more kind of the sense that you would get from a funereal kind of event than, the kind of political overtones that were very obvious there.
Yeah, Eugene, I'm curious what you made of that, because a lot of people commented it was impossible not to watch the speech and also watch the speech as refracted through the faces of police officers behind him in the room. It felt like he was doing something unexpected in that room. I mean, this was a full-on, this was both a eulogy to the fallen and also a kind of full-on speech about all of the issues that have come to the fore this week. How did you feel about that?
It's a tough thing for the president. It's a tough audience. The cops are a tough audience. I'm afraid this was not his best effort. It came across at portions of this like he was hectoring the cops. He really would have won the audience over, it seems to me, if he had said, if you're white in America, you don't know what it's like to be an African American. But if you've never been a cop, you don't know what it's like to be a cop. Then you would have had some attention. So I also think that there was a.
All right, let me stop it there. See, depending on where you're coming from, you heard two different speeches here. Because, and I'm just going to say it. I obviously I've never been a cop. I haven't liked cops. I've had bad experiences with cops. So my judgment is colored. Freely admit that. But I sat there and listened to the speech, and I was looking for points where Obama was going to, let's say, lecture the black community, which he did, and Black Lives Matter, but he also lectured the cops. So he lectured pretty softly, but lectured everybody. And he defended everybody. The gentleman here on the right felt like the cops were being heckled, he said heckled, but attacked, and they were being analyzed, and I'm not even going to say chastised, But the whole nature of the speech, in my opinion, was to put yourself in other people's shoes. Now, it is a true fact that black people have a healthy appreciation for law enforcement and the power that they have over us. That goes without saying. And at the same time, the police officers, when they have to patrol areas that are, let us say, lower socioeconomic, they recognize the inherent dangers that may or may not be there. And both sides need to recognize that. But let the gentleman continue.
A good opportunity under the circumstances to mention the sacrifices that white officers make in America, since they were the targets here. And there's a narrative where that's almost hate speech. White cop. Well, it happens to be a lot of white cops doing a lot of racial healing in the country, down on the ground. They're not commentators or bloggers. They're actually out there in ambiguous, difficult circumstances. I wish he could have acknowledged it. I know whatever he says, he can't win.
See, but that's the problem. He did acknowledge that, but you didn't hear him when he said it. But that is absolutely what he said. He acknowledged the difficult job that cops have going into some of these neighborhoods. But you missed that.
Because it'll be picked apart. There also is a little bit of an element of him coming across as a CEO bashing his employees. He's the president. We've had 2 successive black attorney generals. Where's the reform? And then there's a little disingenuity when you keep repeating this thing that the cops are pulling people over disproportionately. It implies the cops are all racial profilers. And
that's not true. They don't all have to be racial profilers. Not all of them. But you cannot deny that racial profiling does go on. And a black person driving in a car in a white neighborhood is more likely to be pulled over by a cop because they have profiled him and they believe he doesn't belong in that neighborhood than a white driver driving in a black neighborhood. You can't get around that.
it also applies that in minority neighborhoods where everything is unequal, the only thing that should be equal is some sort of proportionality of policing. Well, I think if you watch the speech, just the pieces that you could see, he had the audience for a while, then I think he lost them.
Jelani, I'm curious to hear your response, because Eugene, you're someone that I like tremendously and respect, and we've had on the show, and I wanted to get your perspective, because that is not the speech that I heard, but in some ways that's exactly the issue here of how this.
See, and exactly. Chris is not a cop, and he's not black, and he just said that that wasn't a speech that he heard. So it's bias. It's police bias, and he was a cop for a long time, and that bias is built in, and it's not going away. And until you have the ability to listen and to feel empathy for the other side, be willing to listen and try to understand, nothing is going to work.
Refracted through different years. Jelani, what do you think of that?
Well, what I thought was that Obama did something that we saw with him very early in his career from that 2004 speech, where he kind of articulated a perspective in which he could hear the finer details, the nuances of two people who believe, two sides that believe that they have kind of irreconcilable differences. And he provides a kind of meta-narrative of the ways that people can move forward and not be entrenched in, ceaseless conflict. I think that's what he does when he talks on these occasions. Now, as for the particulars, certainly there were things that police officers would disagree with or find difficult to hear, but there were also things that that activists found difficult to hear. As a matter of fact, when he said that there had been great racial progress and people who did not want to acknowledge that were kind of disrespectful of the struggles that they proclaimed to find important in the first place. And He also kind of gave a full-throated endorsement of what the police are up against, saying that they are used too often. Now, this is a quick point about everything being disproportionate. Eugene, you know, you don't just get to say that there's lots of crime in a community, therefore let's treat the entire community as suspects. That's the issue at hand.
No, I mean,
and so, wait, I listened to you, Eugene. So the point that I was saying here was that even as we saw in Ferguson, that African Americans were being pulled over disproportionately, even when they were more likely to find contraband and controlled substances among white people whom they pulled over. So there was no correlation between the actual crime rate and the likelihood of an African American person being pulled over.
There's a tremendous amount of policing being done in inner city America. A huge percentage of all of the policing is being done in urban America. There's suburban communities where there's virtually no policing done. If you want to have that conversation, it's a very complex conversation. Don't lay it on the cops, though. That's really disingenuous, I think. I'm not saying.
Wait a second, but wait a second.
Who's responsible for policing if not the cops?
Pardon me?
Eugene, no one's beating up on police here, but I'm saying, but who's responsible for policing if not the cops? And I think that, Mr. Obama made a really
political leaders are responsible for policing, actually. As a matter of fact,
here's the thing.
The police are quasi-military, low. This is the front line of the organization. They're quasi-military. You give them direction, they take direction for the most part. It is a lack of political clarity, like on things like drugs, where the cops are patrolling. Some of these places where the cops are patrolling, 30% of the adult males have felony records. Are we blaming the cops for that?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, because if the cops are grabbing people up, okay, at super high level, and I hate to say this, but when people get prosecuted, they tend to want to throw a zillion charge on them, and I know this for a fact, and then knock it down so that the DAs can get felony convictions, because that's what DAs do. DAs aren't out there chasing misdemeanors. When you get somebody in court, they want a felony conviction. As long as they get one, that means they win. So yeah, when you say that the odds are that 1 out of every 3 African American males by the age of 60 will have been to jail 3 times, what is that saying? And I'll use myself as a perfect example. I have a clean record, CLEAN. I have been bonded and can continue to be bonded for millions of dollars in my profession. I have been arrested 3 times on bullshit, 3 times. 2 on traffic tickets, and 1 where the cops violated my constitutional rights. On the 2 traffic tickets, they felt like they needed to take me to jail. Okay, guess what? I get to court and they throw everything out other than the speeding ticket. On the one where they violated my constitutional rights, the judge blew up the cops that arrested me on the bullshit. But I'd been to jail 3 times and I haven't done anything. So if I wasn't, I guess, lucky, had a good lawyer, etc., I'd have a felony conviction where I definitely was innocent and didn't deserve one. Now you get these people that don't have the same financial means that I have, and they get railroaded. So I don't want to hear anything about the people with felonies, because a felony is just a function of the system where the police go out, throw out a wide net, suck in a whole bunch of people, and then they just strain some out, and the rest get railroaded.
Does the president take no responsibility for that? And the attorney general? It's their system. They're the architects.
No, it's not their system. It's a system that they inherited. See, this guy's being totally disingenuous. This system has been in place since the 60s. Now, on a local level, there have been some tweaks here, tweaks there. But ever since that crime bill popped up, the prison population has gone through the goddamn roof. So for him to say that they're the architects of the system, that's a bunch of bullshit. They are working within a system that they inherited, plain and simple. And I'm glad that Chris did this segment with these two guys, because this guy, quote unquote, is supposed to be a bit liberal. That's why he's on MSNBC. But he basically illustrates the problem. He can't see the forest for the trees. He's unwilling to accept any responsibility as far as the police contributing to the problem.
The cops are simply out there in the front line.
Can I just say one here, and I want to keep this going. Actually, we're waiting on this Donald Trump event, but I just want to say two things. One, I think Eugene, this point about disparate levels, right? I mean, racial disparities. I mean, what's interesting to me is the thing you said was when he said that, it makes it sound like all cops are racist, and to me, it's. The point is to try to separate those two, right?
So Chris, I didn't say that. I said that's what he has to be careful that it sounds like.
But I guess my point there, right, is that, I mean, first of all, I think he's trying intentionally to make people uncomfortable in a weird way. I think that was kind of what was the power of the speech. But to me, it's like he is saying that here are what we know about these empirical realities about the disparities in our criminal justice system, which are shot through at every step. And you're right, you can start a policing work your all the way up back to the back end on parole, and you find them, right? So it's not like police are isolated in that sense. But to be able to start with that as the sort of reality, and to hear you feel like that's an attack on the intentions of police seems to me precisely the issue with the conversation, right?
Well, the fact of the matter is that if you're a suburban police officer in America, you're not doing much. The fact of the matter is, by policy, by law, and so by screwball things like in Missouri, where revenue is being collected, in poor neighborhoods, the police are doing a lot. And it's up to the political establishment to set the terms and conditions of what the police need to be doing and how they need to be doing it. You give them direction, they will follow that direction. They're quasi-military people.
See, and that's exactly my point. You give them direction. So the institutions or institutional racism is there, and that direction is coming from institutional racism, i.e., we need to generate revenues. Don't go into the white neighborhoods and write tickets, excessive tickets. Go into the black neighborhoods and write excessive tickets, i.e., Ferguson. So yeah, so you killed your own point. And the cops don't have to follow or obey those instructions. They can basically do the right thing if they choose to, but they prefer to go along with the institutional racism, which pisses the residents off. They get mad at the cops, and then the cops get mad at them for the residents being pissed off at them for the cops screwing everybody.
They are in fact in a large vacuum, being pushed and pulled, and in the middle of a lot of inconsistent feedback. If you go into a community and you listen to what people want, it's very hard to reconcile.
Let me just wait.
Well, Eugene, there is such a thing as a police union. Let's not make it seem as if police are just kind of these ciphers who have no control over what they do, and they're just kind of at the whim of political leaders.
Johnny, I have to say this to you respectfully. There's an elite thing. There's an elite argument here. Now it's time to call it out. There are people that have never done this job, would never do this job, don't understand the job, don't think the job is necessary, don't really know what the job is. You have to. This is actually, believe it or not, ask anybody who wanted to be a cop who became a cop. It is different once you get in there. And the idea that they work in one of the most, typically, where they have their most disempowered, bullying, threatening internal environments. And for the president to get up, and I don't know that he meant to do this, but you need to know, for the president of the United States to get up there, a graduate of Harvard Law School, and sort of seems to be lecturing the cops, I don't think that goes over with a police audience. Now, he said all kinds of other things. The difficulty for this president is whatever he says he can't win. I'm simply saying to you, I'm simply saying my hope would be that, and it may not be doable, that my hope would have been that the vast majority of the speech would have been common ground. There's a certain way also.
Upset common ground. Quickly, Jelani.
But Eugene, so the other point that I was going to make here is that he said very clearly that the majority of the police who are there, they do a very difficult job, respectfully and so on. He could not have been more gracious. But he did point out that police are not, even in talking about the racism within the police department, he says they're not isolated from bigger streams. Right. He said that it's something that is a problem that's systemic in America broadly. So there was nothing in there that singled police out. And even with the extra mile to say something that I actually happen to think is valid, that people ask police to do too much, and in the sense that much of the conflict we have is around police who are in schools, where there should be counselors as opposed to police, where we have police who are handling mental health crises as opposed to having social work. And many of the instances that we've seen explode have come from using police in circumstances where we should not be using law enforcement.
I think this is where the conversation is moving, I think, towards over-policing and what that actually means and what it looks like. Eugene and Jelani, you both talked about it. Thank you tonight for coming on. That was a great experience. Thank you very much.
All right, see, and exactly what Obama was talking about, you see a perfect example of that happening here, where Eugene, the gentleman on the right, could not hear, he couldn't identify with the other side, and he couldn't accept anything that in any way criticized the police, because he's a former policeman. And until you can accept criticism of your side and be willing to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. Now, I will say this, and surprisingly, it was on Fox, where Newt Gingrich was critiquing the president's speech. And Newt Gingrich, obviously not being a police officer, but not being black either, said that it was a very good speech. So again, different people coming from different places with different agendas and being locked into their feelings and being unwilling to modify their positions is going to lead to nothing but problems and very few solutions. All right, and in case you believe I was being a little too harsh on Eugene, this is a clip from the Lawrence O'Donnell show with Mark Claxton. He also, as is Eugene, a retired New York police detective. The only obvious difference between the two men, as they both are teachers at various institutes of learning, is that Eugene is white and Mark Claxton is black. But as I was indicating earlier, the audiences received President Obama's remarks in totally different manners depending on where you were coming from.
He never lost sight, once the speech got underway, of all of the various elements that were involved in this speech and the various audiences he was talking to. Give us your reading on how well he did with the law enforcement audience that he was speaking to today.
This was a brilliant presentation by the president. It was an honorable, a decent, respectable memorial. He personalized each of those 5 police victims. He made reference to family and personal matters. Those things resonate not only with the law enforcement community, but with the nation. And to add on top of that, a speech that was historic, yes, and necessary and timely, that was wide-ranging, that dealt with so many issues, and make a general appeal not only to our humanity as human beings, not only to our humanity, but to our sensibilities. He spoke of things that we all know, even if we don't admit them publicly. We all know these things. And finally, it was a call to action. So it really was a very moving, touching, and historic presentation by the president.
Let's listen to what the
See, so again, it depends on where you're coming from. It depends on your experience. It depends really, even being a police officer, if you're white or black. So this is a major problem. And until we can find a point of reference that we can share, police officer and protester, black, white, male, female, we need a common point of reference, or we need to be able to get to a common point of reference that we can all lock in on, and then expand outward and share our own experiences and be able to receive the experiences of others and accept them as truth. Maybe not our truth, but the truth of another, and be able to understand and empathize with that truth in order to bind us closer together so that we don't have to experience things like this.